right. Isaias Hernandez is an educator, content creator, and creative, more commonly known by his moniker, Queer Brown Vegan, the independent media platform he started to bring intersectional environmental education to all. Most recently, he co-produced the Symbiocene event series in London and New York City, and he is going to be opening our panel right now. Please welcome Isaias Hernandez.
I'm hoping this can be as fun as the other presentation, but if not, no worries. I didn't prepare my speech, but I did prepare my smile. So we'll start with the next slide, I believe. Well, thank you so much again, everyone, for being here today. I just briefly wanted to share a bit about my work, about how do we really build this concept around this term around ecological wealth through climate media. We can go to the next slide, please. As you mentioned, my mom really messed up my bangs. I didn't forgive her because this is a school day picture, so my bangs were horrible. But when people ask me, like, what did you want to be like when you're growing up? A little bit brief background is I come from first-generation Mexican immigrant parents. So I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and lived in Section 8 affordable housing, lived in poverty my entire life with me and my brother and sister. And I would say that, you know, one of the things that really affects a lot of first-generation kids is if you grew up low income or poverty, is that it really shapes your experiences of your ability to believe in yourself, whether or not resources are deserved in your community, whether or not you deserve to be in that space. I mean, like, imposter syndrome itself exists within everyone. But I'd say, like, I think for a lot of, like, you know, low-income people who grew up in poverty and are black and brown, like, our knowledge systems are constantly questioned, no matter the accolades or achievements you have behind your back. We can go to the next slide, please. And today, you know, I think that, like, years later, as I progressed and, you know, went to university, went to Berkeley, did environmental science, the reason why I created climate media online was to really focus on this idea of how do we really create grassroots media. So after I graduated UC Berkeley, I applied to environmental nonprofits like Greenpeace 350, Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, and I applied for digital media roles, and that was like my trajectory. I was like, I'm gonna get into a nonprofit job, and I got rejected from all the foundations and nonprofits, and they said, you don't have good environmental work documented. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I didn't see that as an anger towards those organizations. I saw that as a way for me to just really reevaluate what I wanted to do. And so I moved to New York City and I got a job at a creative agency. And if you were to tell me back in college I would be working in the fashion industry, I'd be like, I don't believe it, but I did. And I did that for 2 years, and it was very grueling, very exploitative. New York City ran me to the ground. It really is a place where your dreams die sometimes. And, you know, I think for me, it was a really good pivotal point in my early 20s to do that. I had no friends. I had no family in New York. As for any young person out there, it's really hard to make friends as an adult after graduation. Like, a lot of people don't really want to be invested in your work, or if you do hang out with people, it's like a one-time thing every 4 or 5 months, or they just ghost you now. But, you know, that was like my reality. We can go to the next slide, please. And one of the things I really emphasize and why I chose environmentalism in my work today is that I've always been very curious about the living and non-living systems around us. We talk a lot about this concept around generational wealth and the American dream. Like, it's very rooted in this idea of, like, through hard work and success, then you can get to whatever you want. But I think I really push back on this narrative and adopt this narrative of ecological wealth because in our dominant capital structure today, we really have devalued all the living species from the fauna, flora, and fungi. I mean, a very easy example I use this is that in many of the classes I took in undergrad for, like, forestry and sciences, you know, when I was taking classes on fisheries, for example, you're so much focused on how much species are worth in an economic system. So, like, any species that are not seen as quote unquote contributing to the economic GDP wealth are seen as irrelevant, or you should not really account those in those models. And so I started recognizing more and more that our younger generations today are a bit disconnected, not because they choose not to be connected, it's that the fact that our school curriculums and the ways that they model it is really based on this idea of individualism. And one of the things I say about environmentalism is that when I told my parents about it, they were worried for me. They said, is that gonna make money? And I don't think they meant it of me wanting to be rich. They just meant it of, like, is this a financially secure job? And, you know, unlike my sister that did she does biomedical engineering, and my brother does computer science, I did the environmental route of, like, I want to save the trees and the people. Can you go next slide, please? And so that's where I found my passion for environmental media. Go to the next slide. What I found in environmental media today, and it's very interesting with Americans, is that the reason why I call myself an environmental educator, not a climate educator, is that climate and climate change is a very, at times, not a triggering word for some, but I would say that's a very divisive word for some people. And so I think that the reason why I chose environmental educator is that it allowed me to become more broad. And this is actually from the Pearson's Learning Global Survey, is that, yeah, there are a lot of Americans that want to learn about climate change after recognizing it wasn't enough. And I remember in middle school when I learned about climate change, one of the things it said about the pros of global warming is that happier cows and more sunny days. And then the cons were like 100 of them. So I said, okay, we definitely have a problem here today. Next slide, please. And so after I graduated college and I worked at that toxic job, I realized, okay, why don't I actually realize like what is the problem I'm trying to identify in my work? So according to Pearson's Global Learning Survey, is that right, 88% of people want to learn about climate change, but then environmental nonprofits, brands, foundations, and institutions today really lack not I wouldn't say the communication skills, but how to build a strategic community. And then 91% of people, report learning from climate issues from social media, which is really interesting because if you look at the data back 10, 20 years ago, traditionally those who learned about climate or environmental related issues was through journalism, through TVs and films, which were very minuscule. And today, social media makes a large percentage of that. Next slide, please. And so I identified why I wanted to do climate media. Like when people ask me, like, why are you doing this work today? Are you just an influencer? I said, well, I think social media has a large impact. I'm not saying that it's the end-all, be-all solution either, because I don't want to be altruistic here. But I want to be very realistic, is that a lot of the younger generations today and also older generations are coming to social media as a way to learn after realizing they're not really getting educated as much. And go to the next slide, please. And so I created my independent platform, not to talk about food, but I talked a lot about education and independent research and what it means to actually build your brand as an individual on that end. Go to the next slide, please. When I first started my account actually in 2019, you could see my horrible graphic design skills, is that I just wanted to talk about environmentalism. And so I started on Instagram after realizing back then, I guess I'm on the cusp with millennial and Gen Z because I don't really relate to a lot of older millennials, but then I don't relate to younger Gen Z, is that I wanted to just distill environmental topics, so what that meant. And so I created my account on that end. Next slide, please. And my content later evolved after I got better at graphic design and realizing there is a way of content creators and media creators working with institutions. I actually collaborated on a series with the Solutions Journalism Network, and we were the first influencers, quote unquote, to actually work with a journalism company to really produce climate solutions and how to communicate that to online. And I was very proud of this because, as you know, I think that sometimes journalists get annoyed by content creators or influencers who just call themselves journalists, but then just review articles that are written on the New York Times by other journalists. And I can understand that, but I am not one of those creators. And so you can go to the next slide, please. And these are just some of the examples of the ways that I kind of bring climate literacy or environmental literacy online, is that how do we make it engaging? And so when I look back at my old school systems of how I was taught, I really look into colorful graphics because for me, color coding my notes was one way of how I passed my classes. If anyone ever remembers me or knew of me, and when I was younger, I had that big 10-colored, multicolored pen, and people would always get annoyed at me of switching colors. I think go to the next slide, please. And that goes into just this idea of video content creation and how does this relate to entertainment. So 3 years ago, I was very much tired of doing infographics and tired of doing short form content. I told my team, like, we need to evolve the brand again. And I've always been very inspired by TV shows like Nat Geo and Discovery Channel of famous environmentalists unpacking landscapes. But then I realized that a lot of those environmentalists had people that had access to money, their parents had PhD programs, they had all this wealth of knowledge. And I looked at myself and my family and I was like, yeah, I don't know if we have that or if we are environmentalists. And so I took this idea to create Teaching Climate Together after going through a series of auditions for TV networks like PBS and other things. And I realized if I don't produce my own work, I'm not going to get anywhere in life. And unfortunately, like that's how the industry is really set up. And it's not a bad thing either. It's something to realize. Go to the next slide, please. And so I created my web series actually just a year ago. And it was based on this idea of, how do we mix a PBS educational lifestyle videos to actually integrate environmental terminology? So the point of the series is that we go to different states or the different parts of countries, and we interview academic scholars or activists that really distill climate and environmental research. And it's very focused on not just about climate change, it's focused on local issues and local solutions. And I realize like there is a lot of things that we often really forget in our communities that's happening. We can go to the next slide, please. And here's just some forms of actually trailer videos and like also things that were cut out. But episode 1 and 2 were produced just last year, and then episode 3 is right now in post-production. But we can just kind of showcase an example of like some of the behind-the-scenes footage that we got. Don't think it's playing the audio.
Put a riparian ecosystem in a very defined channel. Do you know why it would be?
Well, for development, to prevent that flooding to getting into the homes of people.
You got it, exactly. So as we were mentioning at some of the other stops, we have developed the city of Los Angeles and the greater metropolitan area out from the river. And as we continue to develop and develop, we added more of us and our infrastructure to around this ecosystem.
Yeah, so that's just really brief about like, it was like a deleted clip that we ended up not using, but it was something that we posted online to kind of get a teaser into the long form video. And it actually got 500,000 views on TikTok because people made fun of my outfit, but then they also said something about GTA. So I was like, cool. It blew up for the random reason. We go to the next slide. And so the second video that we're gonna play right now, actually, I'll just talk really quick. It's a video on the first episode we ever did with the academic scholar who reached out to me. If you ask an old person if they'll ever do a TikTok, they'll probably say no. But she said yes to me, and this is what came out, and yeah.
My name is Ellen Kelsey. I work in evidence-based hope. I'm on TikTok. I'm not the person you expect to see on TikTok, but I'm here because this is the #1 place people are hearing about climate. You almost never hear about climate solutions, and that's because less than 3% of all media even covers a solution. It's always problem identification. However, solutions are happening. They're happening at local scales, national scales, international scales. You have a right to hear about those. We're just creating a system of doomism that disempowers you, makes you feel like crap, and also does not help your capacity to help the planet. So demand evidence-based hope, hashtag evidence-based hope, share the solutions that are happening in your neighborhood.
Yeah, so this is a really quick example. And then the third one is actually our sneak peek of it's still in post-production, but this one's basically exploring the term critical ecology and how slavery affected the land in America today. I'm very, very proud to be working with a team that's Black and Indigenous of academic scholars on this.
Take that analysis of power, of equality versus inequality, and apply it to how we think about the ways that nature has been shaped by society. I think that's a way that we're going deeper than a lot of environmental researchers by saying, the nature of nature really depends on who we are and how we are in society. And
yeah, that's just a sneak peek, but we're still editing that. Go to the next slide, please. And one of the things I think how I get my funding models is that a lot of people ask, well, how do you produce these episodes? Well, to be honest, it's very self-funded. So a lot of the reason why I created a content creator platform is to get funded through brands and foundations, which has been very successful. But one of the things I got is like, well, how do you measure impact off these videos? And so one of the ways that me and my team built this impact report is actually hosting events that supplement the episodes. So not only do we bring this digital media to this global audience, we bring an event to the community. And so we actually, for the urban ecology video that we shot here in LA, we had decided to do an event, and I was very surprised because I put it out like a few days before thinking only 10 people were gonna show up, but you can play the video. 70 people did show up to this event, which was insane.
And oftentimes I hear, LA has a river?
Yeah, and I think that's, on that end, it's like, how do we really improve climate literacy? After talking to some of the nonprofits that ended up coming to the event, they told me we struggle with a lot of young people coming to our events. And I said, well, this is a perfect example of how you can actually work with young environmental media creatives, is that we have the community. The older people struggle to get those younger people there. And so we need to really find ways to communicate better. And that's what Queer Brown Vegan did. And the second one, I'm going to be ending this really quickly and very short, is I created my second web series. It's called Sustainable Jobs. It's a spinoff from the show Dirty Jobs on Discovery Channel, where Mike Rowe goes to the most dirtiest jobs in America. And so the Sustainable Jobs series was kind of this idea of like, why don't we go to the most environmentally related industries to teach people about the ways that they can actually get involved in a company that's mission driven. You can go to the next slide, please. And you can just play the trailer real quick. Trying to live in a clean world can be a little bit messy.
We're really starting to think not just about safety, but carbon footprint.
We only have one planet, and we have to take care of it because we see the devastation cost.
We do have the initiative to start to say, I want better for the world and also for a job that's healthy for my future.
If it's not messy, it's not fun.
So come along with me today on a tour of Sustainable Jobs.
And yeah, and I think if you're a brand or a corporation that's willing to invest in the series, please let me know. But yeah, to get that episode out, I had to go back and forth with the company. A lot of legal agreements to be signed. As the independent creative, it's honestly really hard to do this work. And I think when people see it, they're like, that's easy, I can do that. And it's like, no, actually it takes a few months to get things produced and legally approved. And also corporations have a lot of strict rules. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it of how I'm communicating climate literacy. And hopefully one day I'll have a TV show. So thank you so much, everyone.